We are ready to launch part 2 of our new modern day story analysis involving all the events from Assassin's Creed Shadows and the Animus Hub, and in this video we're going to discuss the early phases, the awakening of the AI developed by Abstergo that is at the core of this new narrative. We're going to meet new Abstergo characters working on it, and especially we're going to dig deep into the Templar's new and quite interesting plans for their new world order in this near future modern day setting. So let's not wait any longer and let's dive into part 2 of our new modern day story analysis. So we pick up where we left off after analyzing the first set of modern day files where we were introduced to Joel Eastman and the new cell of assassins who were able to kidnap Abstergo's Dr. Muller, one of the lead scientists on Project Mnemosyne, a new project developed by Abstergo in this new and near future modern day setting, a project that was described as a revolutionary step forward in the Templar's plan by our new high-ranking Templar called Director Ospanov. But what is Project Mnemosyne really about? That's one of the questions that the second set of modern day files called Awakening can help us find an answer to. Here, Awakening is definitely referred to the awakening of a certain AI that by now you should know of, what it can do and what Abstergo is trying to do with it, but let's start at the beginning. The Awakening set starts the same way that the Legacy set of files ended, with a letter sent by Director Ospanov, which at this point I'd imagine is one of the top directors on Project Mnemosyne or even on multiple projects, as he sounds like a proper higher up. In this case, the letter is a memo to a new Templar that we get to know called Overseer Lothian, and from his position and the content of the memo, it does look like he's an overseer of Project Mnemosyne specifically, one that makes direct decisions on the project such as the one commanded by Ospanov that is teaming up two employees, Cayetano Ortiz and Junko Maeda, two characters that we are going to meet throughout the next Awakening files. Ospanov says that teaming them up, Ortiz can keep Maeda focused and steer her towards the needed direction, while Maeda is a genius, a necessary asset. Keep that in mind, as it will be mentioned multiple times that Maeda and Ortiz are necessary assets, but Maeda is also described to be unpredictable and has some scattershot methods. Ospanov states that the highest goal, the ultimate purpose of Project Mnemosyne is to quote-unquote eliminate the strife that disorder brings, which is of course a cryptic sentence that we are going to try and hypothesize on later on, but suffice to say that through Project Mnemosyne, by controlling the memories, the Templars are indeed trying to design a new world order where they are going to somehow achieve peace. And thus, Ospanov is very much disturbed by the fact that he needs someone as chaotic as Junko Maeda to achieve total control, and it's for this very reason that Maeda doesn't have to know what she is really working towards. She's also described as volatile, self-sabotaging, and apt to rebel, all features that don't really match the Templar ideology, more like the assassin one if I do say so myself, and thus she imperatively doesn't have to know what she's really working on. Finally, Ospanov tells Lothian that despite the assurances of Security Chief Klein, the assassins persist, which seems to prove that the Awakening set of files is set after the Legacy one. Thus, Ospanov warns Lothian to stay vigilant, because even with the highest security, the assassins might find a way in and any leak of information towards them cannot be risked, even though at this point it's very likely that the assassins are trying to already get some information out of Dr. Muller. Ospanov ends the memo with an ominous sentence, saying that there mustn't be any leaks until the project is complete, because after it is complete, it will be too late to even try and stop it. The second file from the Awakening set is a letter from Cayetano Ortiz, one of the two Abstergo employees that we mentioned earlier, to his wife Sunita. or as the AI that reads the letter calls it, an unlicensed communication. As we can see from the file, within Abstergo, and I suppose within the buildings dedicated to Project Mnemosyne, there are surveillance cameras that can capture any kind of written text, which can then be converted by OCR, that means optical characters recognition, and linked to the profile of an employee, so that even these personal communications can be stored in Abstergo's databases for review. More specifically, Cayetano Ortiz is also codified as EMP09/324 with the letters EMP as we saw in our previous videos, meaning employee within the Abstergo servers. In the letter, Cayetano writes that he wishes he could hear his wife's voice and his son's. He says it's been 7 months since he has joined this new project, and he has the mandate to not have any contact with anyone outside not just the project but the specific section he is working on. He knows what that involves, but he is really worried about his children not seeing him for several months, and this is messing him up. But on the brighter side, he says the work is going well. He says that they are about to complete their work, they are on the verge of something incredible, which kinda matches what Ospanov said, but I feel it's not for the same reasons. So once the fruit of their work is completed, he is going to ask to go back home to her, even though his superiors tell him that she is alright, that they are tending to her needs, but I do feel they are lying to him. Cayetano also writes about Junko Maeda, the employee that was assigned to him by the overseer Lothian. He says that she has exceptional intellect, but she lives between quote-unquote effervescent joy and utter panic. She would produce 10 great ideas a day, of which 9 are nonsense, and she doesn't even take care of herself well. The personification of chaos and disorder, like Ospanov said. And instead, Cayetano represents patience and solidity, something that makes him remember his time with his wife, which brings joy to him because he already used to write letters to her when they were young, but also sadness because he will have to burn this letter like all the other ones that he's written because Abstergo wouldn't let her read them, not even after the work is complete, as all that would still be a leak of sorts. In Cayetano's words, even writing these words on a letter would be a disciplinary breach, which is quite interesting because he doesn't know he has been actually spotted for doing this, and as we'll see, this definitely isn't the worst breach that he is going to commit. The next file is an internal online chat between Junko Maeda and Cayetano Ortiz, where we can finally get to see them talking, but more importantly, we finally get a glimpse of what Project Mnemosyne is, and at the core of it lies an AI of an extreme level of sophistication. An AI that has been developed by Abstergo and then Junko and Cayetano and possibly other employees have been testing in what they call silos, that is, vertical and contained slices of the animal simulations with specific conditions where they let this AI run free and see how it behaves. What's the final purpose of this? We'll try and find out later, but suffice to say, this AI is interacting with the animals. It may interact with the memories stored in the Abstergo databases, and thus it may interact with all the memories that the Templars have been able to put their hands on. Now, Joel Eastman's line about Abstergo having all the memories sounds even more ominous, doesn't it? So back to the chat, we do see Junko, whose disjointed spelling is very much in tune with her character, saying that in one of the silos, the AI is behaving in a surprising and interesting way. It's not just writing its own code, which according to Cayetano is not new, but instead of quote-unquote chewing through the big historical stuff, that is processing the major historical events presented in the animal simulations, it has actually created a new algorithm to focus on one person at a time. In Junko's words, she's going through the animals, extrapolating every possible permutation of one person's life, not only what happened, but what could have happened if any potential variable changed, like if they didn't meet their sweetheart or if they dropped a cup at the wedding and got embarrassed. calculating all these permutations, which is not so different from what the reader and Layla might have been doing all this time, to Junko is like a form of imagination by the AI, and it's not that wrong, as the AI is actually exploring all possible scenarios in the life of the person that it is analyzing. Why is it analyzing all possible scenarios in one's life though? Junko says it is to know the humans, and that makes a lot of sense. You can imagine that the AI is trying to understand what it is analyzing based on the set of data at its disposals, but keep this in mind, the AI exploring all possible scenarios and permutations for a single person's life, because that might come in handy later. Cayetano shifts topics by reminding Junko that the AI has also tried to find out how to break down the security protocols set around her sections. Of course, you can't have an AI plot and not have that, and while Junko jokes about it, she also recognizes that they have to purge and eliminate this whole section before the AI gets much further, but considering this is a new step forward by the AI, Cayetano decides to take a slice of this new extrapolation approach by the AI and test it on a new silo with higher security. So as you can see, through this file we are seeing the first glimpses of the AI plot that is at the base of the modern day Tide to Shadows, how Abstergo started meddling with AI and how it made it its core project in this new modern day set in the near future. The next file is one of the juiciest, as it's definitely forthcoming and provides quite the information on a chunk of the current situation in the modern day. It's another chat discussion between Junko Maeda and Cayetano Ortiz, but this time it's about a test on the AI created by Abstergo that Junko ran and then eliminated/removed, which by the way Ortiz criticizes, saying that the test should have been logged with Overseer Lothian, meaning employees are not authorized to run tests on their own, and this test was quite peculiar indeed. Junko created a new silo where she put the AI and provided it with two possible outcomes. Both of them had to be true, but both of them couldn't be true, and then gave her the imperative directive to make it make sense. And thus the AI, in order to try and make an impossible problem make sense, created another AI, a new version of itself, by splitting part of her code so that each of them believed in one of the two outcomes, and then quote-unquote, they duked it out. They clashed with each other up until the point where one of the two absorbed the other and decided on one point of view. It focused imperatively only on one of the two outcomes, refusing that the other even existed, which Cayetano says is very human-like, as humans are designed to support existing beliefs and to resist new ones, which I believe is also a slight dig at those who are not open to different points of view, to different opinions, very similarly to the discourse from the legacy set of files on history being the result of a multitude of points of views and not just a single one. So it feels like Abstergo's new sophisticated AI has approaches that resemble that of the human brain, but that's definitely not the juicy part of the file, because as you might have guessed, the situation of the two AIs clashing against each other is exactly what is happening throughout the modern day portion of Shadows, and more importantly in the modern day ending, which per se might seem shallow or difficult to comprehend, but putting things in this perspective and knowing that what we know as the Ego AI is supposedly the final version of the sophisticated AI created by Abstergo, then it's pretty easy to see that what we know as the Guide is another twin AI generated from the Ego AI facing, as we'll see, a new impossible conundrum that is way more familiar to the AC fans. It is that of freedom versus control, that of allowing versus removing free will from humans and the consequences coming out of that. All these are topics that we are going to discuss when we get to the ending of the game, but suffice to say that this experiment by Junko provides us with the elements to understand the nature of the two AIs that accompany us through Shadows and even after that. If what we saw in the previous file wasn't enough, we have more revelations from the next one, coming once again from Junko Maeda, but this time these discoveries are quite unwanted. The file comes in the shape of a formal request made by Junko Though her writing really isn't formal, that's another part of her volatile character, and try and keep that in mind as in future files, Junko will submit another formal request, but in that case, the writing will be way more formal. In this request though, Junko is identified as employee number 09/645, while Cayetano was identified as employee number 09/324, so maybe the first number identifying an Abstergo employee is tied to the project that the person is working on, or possibly on the location that they are working in. Anyway, in the formal request, after stating that the concerned project is indeed Mnemosyne, Junko asks if she can have a visual on the AI's core directives, asking if there's still only 3 of them. Now, we don't know directly what all of these 3 directives are, but we do know one of them from the actual modern day ending of Shadows, where the Ego AI states that the first rule decrees that the humans have to be protected even from themselves and their violent nature, and interestingly enough, the first rule is very similar to Isaac Asimov's first law of robotics that was used in many of his science fiction stories, which says that a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Thus, if the first core directive of the Ego AI is inspired by Asimov's first law of robotics, then maybe the other 2 directives were also originally inspired by Asimov's second and third laws of robotics, which respectively state that a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law, and a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law, which, as you can imagine, could both be easily bent by a rogue or quasi-independent AI like Ego seems to be at the end of Shadows' modern day story. But in the Awakening set of files, we are some time before that, and in this formal request, Junko is indeed asking if the original 3 core directives for the AI have stayed the same or have been tweaked, because in her most recent tests, she has seen some specific behaviors by the AI that aren't in line with the directives and with what Junko has been used to. Junko writes that she was able to see that indeed somebody has accessed the core, somebody with high clearance at Abstergo, even though through her account Junko doesn't have access to the records. Junko says that she understands that this is probably coming from the top brass and it doesn't concern her, except if she doesn't know what changed in the directives, she cannot understand the AI behavior and changes thereof during her tests, if they are dependent on the modified directives or if they come from Junko's own tests and conditions. Thus, Junko asks to just see the edits to the core directives of the AI, but as we can see, the request has been denied, leaving Junko in the dark and Abstergo's top brass likely tampering with the original nature of the AI. Speaking of tampering and dealing with the AI, Junko also adds that she has found out that the directors of the project have already started interacting with the AI, even if it's not finalized, even if it's not stabilized, calibrated and ready. Junko talks about not being able to be sure of the outputs and taking advice from the AI, meaning that she's implying that these risky interactions involve the Abstergo directors asking the AI for specific information or requests based on what it knew, but these requests were too early, and according to Junko, they risk getting skewed answers that Abstergo itself could base its decisions on. After all, it's a rogue AI plot. It needs its greedy characters that cause the AI to go rogue and bring a doomed or dystopian situation, right? We are getting closer to the end of the Awakening set of files, and in this new file we have a new letter interaction between Project Mnemosyne's overseer Lothian and the director Ospanov. A letter that implies more communication in between this and the one that we've seen at the start of the file set, but also it confirms some of Junko Maeda's deepest worries. In fact, it starts with Lothian mentioning that in previous correspondence Ospanov stated that the AI proposed a new initiative to the Abstergo's board of directors. This means a number of things. First, that it's true that Abstergo's directors have been interacting with the AI ahead of its release. Second, that the overseer Lothian doesn't seem to be allowed to interact with the AI. And third, well, the AI has not just been answering questions by Abstergo's directors, but it's already proposing new approaches in Abstergo's and the Templars' business. More specifically, with this initiative, the AI suggested the Templars to re-evaluate their approach towards the bleeding effect in the Animus. Now, in case you might not know, within Assassin's Creed, the bleeding effect is a disorder caused by being exposed to the Animus for long sessions without breaks, and it basically causes the genetic memories of one's ancestor to blend with the descendant's one to the point where the Animus user is unable to distinguish between them and can even end up in a mental breakdown or worse. Now, in the letter, Lothian does not outright state what the AI's suggestion was. I guess we'll have a better idea with the next file and also with a dialogue from Shadows, but Lothian says that they have tested the AI's idea and it's working, and it shocks him to see that this idea is based on both quantum technology and neurophysiology, which the AI is seemingly understanding and mastering. Moreover, this new approach to the bleeding effect is so groundbreaking that Lothian asked for permission to actually test it on humans, stating that this approach could be revolutionary in the Templars' plans, and we'll see why once we get what the approach might be about. Lothian then moves on with overpraising the director and stated that they are on a cusp, where the AI is not just learning from humans and their history through their genetic memories in the Animus, but it has started teaching them, introducing new ideas that the humans hadn't thought about. It's taking the lead as the Templars had hoped, so again we get a little new bit of the Templars' plan, which was to teach the AI about human history, make it so that it could act upon their plans and goals, even by finding new avenues and strategies, and then release it, and when that happened, it would be too late to stop it. And because it is a common understanding that once the AI is out, it'll be too late to stop it, we have seen it in multiple files including this one, Lothian suggests including security in these final phases leading up to the AI's release. He states that so far, the AI has been tested within siloed instances of the Animus, the silos we mentioned in the previous files, which are defined as slices of history kept separate from the main Animus architecture to keep the AI contained and avoid it proliferating outside of them. Lothian is suggesting to increase and improve the security protocols because he has seen the AI making alterations in the timelines contained within the siloed instances of the Animus, and these alterations are seemingly having consequences that Abstergo already can't track in its entirety. So Lothian is worried that such an issue applied to the wider Animus servers and infrastructure could cause system-breaking mismatches, which the Templars definitely don't want to happen. In essence, for what I understand, the AI is making alterations to how history is portrayed in the Animus, or more properly, within the simulations generated within the siloed slices of the Animus. It is trying to generate some variations of sorts from what actually happened historically, which also matches the various permutations of a single person's life that Junko Maeda saw the AI extrapolating during the tests. But the question is, why is it doing it? Why is the AI making permutations and extrapolating variations to the simulations and timelines in the Animus? Again, we shall see later. It's not outright stated, but I believe we do have most of the elements to understand it with the final file of the Awakening set. Lothian once again remarks that soon they will reach a point where the AI's true potential and thus the Templars' new vision and essentially their new world order can be reached only when the AI is released to the public and all over the world, but Lothian says that it has to happen under the Templars' conditions and following the Templars' plans and their own agenda. And finally, we are at the end of the Awakening set of modern day files. We are about to check its final file, which is a surveillance audio file, the transcript of a conversation between Junko Maeda and Cayetano Ortiz that took place sometime after the letter from Lothian to Ospanov, and it's also a conversation that they thought was secret and not captured by mics, but once again Abstergo security is everywhere. Their conversation was captured and immediately flagged for urgent security. So what is so important for Junko to call Cayetano in a secluded location to discuss? We can imagine the state of mind that a person like Junko is in right now. She suspects that the Abstergo top brass is meddling with the AI's core directives and is interacting with it, and she has mentioned her worries and asked for more clarity, but her request was denied, and so at this point she is even more suspicious and her rebellious nature has taken control of her, and thus after running one of her tests, instead of flushing the silo completely, she only disabled it and went through its code, which is a so-called Code 3 violation according to Cayetano, something that employees are definitely not supposed to do. But Junko did it anyway, and she found out that Abstergo is indeed testing the AI on humans, which means that after Lothian asked for limited trials on the AI's new bleeding effect approach on humans, Ospanov accepted that, and now Junko has found out about these tests. More specifically, Junko says that the directors gave the AI a slice of the animus to work with and put human users in there with her. The full Abstergo experience, as Junko calls it, as in a full animus experience like Abstergo has proposed so many times to the public based on the user's genetic memories, but this time the experience was run and maintained by the AI. Cayetano is shocked by this, he cannot believe it. He believes that there would be ethical considerations involved with this, Abstergo wouldn't do it, but Junko has seen the video logs, and the most important element is that the AI was running a version of the animus where she got editorial privileges, as in she could modify the events experienced in the animus, she could tweak the timelines in the animus so to speak, and even if there may be some knock-on effects, says Junko, even if there were potential repercussions or domino effects caused by modifying the events in the animus, Junko herself saw that the AI could simulate and extrapolate any possible outcome or negative repercussion and avoid it in the first place. And finally, at last, Junko says what the plan of these final tests is. Abstergo wants to know if the AI can fool the human users by changing history within the animus simulation without triggering a desynchronization. This is the new way that Abstergo wants to influence the people's minds and create their new world order in our new modern day setting. They are not changing the course of history, they are not changing the past, they seem to be planning changing the course of how history is represented within the animus, conveying the message that they want to convey, telling their users what they want them to remember, influencing them at the neurological level, and this is the new approach on the bleeding effect. Instead of having the memories of one's ancestors bleed through to their descendant, if the AI is able to avoid desynchronization when running an animus simulation against the actual course of history, then Abstergo will have their fabricated memories bleed through to their users instead of the actual ones. After all, Abstergo has all the memories, like Joel Eastman said. This could lead to the human users being dulled by the feed of information fed to them by the AI and eventually believing in stuff that didn't really happen. This could lead to the human users being indoctrinated at the neurological level, and long-term wise, it could be even more powerful than how the pieces of Eden act on their targets' minds, which usually has very short-term effects, and this indoctrination would be perfect for Abstergo's creation of their new world order, completely eliminating the strife that disorder brings, as Ospanov put it. And this isn't even that much of a theory. If you read through the lines in the first rift of the modern day in Shadows called Bleeding Effect, which takes place when the ego AI is already active, sometime after these conversations, the guide actually states that the main character's time in the animus ego was meant to weaken them through a drip feed of memories that was meant to subdue them and invade their senses in what the others before you called a bleeding effect. This flow of memories from the Animus ego was meant to dull the main character and hollow them from within, and only then she, which means the ego AI, would have claimed our main character, that is us, where claiming could mean a lot of things like indoctrinating, controlling, and way more, as we'll see. Also, this new approach on the bleeding effect as a means to influence one's mind, again reading through the lines, is indeed quite the heavy criticism on society. That's what ads do. They generate in your mind a need that you didn't know you had. That's what some politicians do. They generate in people's mind a belief, a conviction that oftentimes is uninformed or very much one-sided. That's what media campaigns do, trying to exploit mass communications to drive a belief or to convey sometimes incorrect messages that could affect any aspects of society and life. That's what Abstergo is trying to do in this new modern day setting. They are making history easy, as Jeff Eastman said, and by making it so easy and accessible through the Animus, they are actually starting a process to dull people's minds, to potentially indoctrinate them or weaken them, to reduce their critical thinking and approach to history and life. And having both the chance of avoiding the sinking and making use of the bleeding effect, both the Templars and the AI could have many types of influence on the human users of the Animus. The bleeding effect doesn't only have influence on neurology, it also has effect on muscle memories. That's how some of the modern day main characters obtain the agility and abilities of their ancestors. So imagine Abstergo or our AI being able to create an army of indoctrinated soldiers, or conversely, if the sync can be avoided, imagine if Abstergo or our AI were able to force, keep, and maintain the human users in their Animus and never ever leave. This would be another way to eliminate the strife that disorder brings, and it could be another dystopian outcome where Abstergo would be fully in control of the human population, which wouldn't even be so far from when Juno and her followers, the instruments of the First Will, were considering transferring all humans into the Grey, this digital afterlife realm, as the AC Wiki calls it, where consciousnesses could be uploaded and stay forevermore. But all of this, at the time of this final conversation between Junko Maeda and Cayetano Ortiz, hasn't happened yet. This is potentially, supposedly, all part of the Templars' plans that Junko is slowly finding the first breadcrumbs of, but Cayetano is having none of this. He is believing her, and right because he believes her, he doesn't want to know more about her findings, because knowing these secrets can very likely be a death sentence, were the Templars to discover Junko's investigations and their latest chat. Cayetano says he should report her to cover himself, to allow himself one chance still to see his family again, and he actually leaves her, possibly considering to actually report her, but as we can see, this will be useless, because the Abstergo mic has already caught the whole conversation. Junko and Cayetano are very much risking it now, but as we'll see, they are currently too important to be disposed of. So that's the ending of the Awakening set of modern day files, a much juicier set of files where we saw where the Templars were standing before the modern day events in Shadows, much like what we saw about the Assassins in the Legacy set of files. It's much juicier as a set of files because by reading through the lines, we very much discovered what the new plans by the Templars are, and most importantly, this set of files was much more connected to Assassin's Creed Shadows, especially its modern day, but not only, as we'll see. Here we saw how the original version of the Ego AI was developed, how the Guide AI might have been generated, what the Templars were trying to do by developing the AI, and how they were aiming to reach this new version of their classic New World Order ideal. But at this point already, not everything is working properly for the Templars. Like in any AI story, their sophisticated AI is often described as trying to get out of its confinements, with them always rushing to keep her contained with new levels of security, and it really looks like a single human error at any time could let the AI get out, go rogue, and do its own things. Plus, let's not forget about the Assassins. They have kidnapped one of the scientists' masterminds behind Project Mnemosyne, so they are definitely planning to get in Abstergo's way and to eventually strike. And this is where our new modern day main character, that is us, comes into play. day. So join us in our next video where we are going to discuss the early phases of Shadows' modern day, with our main character connecting to the new Animus Ego, accessing the Animus Hub, meeting the guide AI, and something more we're not going to mention right away. But if you can't wait for that and you need to catch up on the other modern day events, specifically on the Assassin's side, you can check part 1 of this series, which you can see on screen right now. Thanks for watching. A huge thanks to our ATA insiders and initiates for their amazing and continuous supports, and I'll see you in our next video.